Welcome everyone. And so this week we're going to discuss equine reproduction, okay? This is a topic that's very near and dear to me, I'm passionate about. I did my graduate work at the Equine Reproduction lab next door, and so I'll talk to you for days and days about equine reproduction. But we're gonna visit a little bit today in the classroom. I'm gonna take you over virtually to the ERL, the Equine Reproduction lab next door, show you around there a little bit. We're going to go over what that stallion collection looks like in the processing of that semen, and then we'll sum everything up with the ultrasound of a mare, okay? And so, again, if you guys get a chance in the future to go over and work, volunteer, do anything over at the Equine Reproduction Lab here at CSU, I highly encourage you to do so. It's world renowned, it's one of the best in the country. Yes, I'm biased, but it absolutely is. And so I highly encourage you to spend some of your time over at that lab through the breeding season, okay? Now, to kick us off in the classroom here first today, I'm going to tell you a little bit of an old legend, or you might regard it as a wise tale, and we're going to break this down in a little bit of a Mythbusters fashion, okay? And that will kind of lead us into what is required for us to be able to collect that stallion. And so there's this old legend, goes back to the late 1400s. There was this Arab chieftain, okay, and he really admired this rival stallion out across the desert that was, again, one of his rivals. So there's obviously no way he could breed to this stallion. And he's trying to figure out how to breed it to one of his prize mares. And he comes up with this grand scheme one night, okay? And he tells one of his men, he says, I want you to go out across the desert and I want you to watch that stallion breed all these mares, okay? Now, that last mare that he breeds, I want you to go over to her, I want you to take a silver spoon and I want you to scoop out the contents of that mare's vaginal vault into this leather bag that's full of goat's milk, okay? Run back across the desert and we're gonna dump that into our prize mare. Well, legend has it, lo and behold, and mare gets pregnant. Could that have even happened, okay? Is that plausible? Some would regard that as the first artificial insemination, or AI. And so we're gonna talk about a few things here on what's required to be able to collect that stallion, okay? So, that said, to collect stallion, and we're also gonna say here, and get mare pregnant, okay? So, first thing that we want is this live mare in heat, okay? Let's go back to our legend. Do you think we had a live mare in heat? Yeah, okay. If that stallion was able to mount that mare and breed that mare, I can pretty well guarantee you she was in heat, okay? If she was not in heat and she was in diester, she would have wanted nothing to do with that stallion and kicked the crap out of him, okay? And so, pretty easy to say, sure, we had a live mare in heat. How are we going to accomplish this in our collection shed? Well, we have a couple ways, okay? One of which is during the breeding season, we have tons of recipient mares around that are constantly cycling. We'll go out to the pen and we'll tease that pen of mares and try to figure out who's in heat, okay? And those that come up to the fence, start posturing, urinating, winking, everything else that are truly in heat, will pull out and they will become our tease mare for that day perhaps, okay? And so they'll go up in the front set of stocks that you'll see in that video that I show you here shortly, okay? And so that's one way that we can get a live mare in heat. As we get to the non-breeding season and mares are no longer cycling much, what do? Well, another option is to utilize overectomized mares, okay? And so we usually have one or two overectomized mares. Now, can an overectomized mare that has no ovaries produce any estrogen on her own? No, okay? Estrogen is a steroid hormone, okay? It is produced by that growing follicle on the ovary. And so what we now do is we take that overectomized mare and we can give her an exogenous shot of estrogen to cause her to show behavioral signs of heat. And then we can use her as a tease mare. And so that gives us a backup option when mares are no longer cycling through the breeding season and we don't have a lot of options for that tease mare. You also hear this referred to as a hot mare. So hot mare, tease mare, whatever you want to call it, okay? But pretty easy to say in the legend we could have had a live mare in heat. We're going to expect the same when we go to collect that stallion, okay? The next thing that we want is physical stimulation of the penis, and particularly the glans penis. Okay? There are three things that we'll utilize to be able to achieve that physical stimulation, okay? The first of which is pressure, okay? So this pressure is going to be maintained by a water bladder in our AV, or artificial vagina. I'll show you that AV here momentarily, and I'll talk you through that. But for now, hang on to this thought that that pressure is maintained by the water bladder, okay? The next one that needs to be met is temperature, okay? We're going to have this pretty warm, okay? This is going to be the water bladder inside internal temperature of that 48 to 50 degrees Celsius, okay? And so to provide proper stimulation of the stallion's penis, we need proper pressure, proper temperature, and we need adequate lubrication, okay? And so there's also two types of lubricant that can be used. We could use a non-spermicidal or a spermicidal. Okay, you might say, well, why would you use the spermicidal? Really, I'll talk to you about that AV here shortly. It's not going to mix with that ejaculate, and so it really doesn't matter which. Just telling you that both are available and on the market. You could use either one. And so again, to provide proper physical stimulation, we're going to have adequate pressure, proper temperature, and proper lubrication, okay? And that's going to help to stimulate that stallion. When you see that AV, this will make much more sense throughout, okay? The other thing that I put on here was, and to get a mare pregnant, okay? Before we do that, let's talk through this. Do you think we had physical stimulation of that stallion's penis in our legend? Well, how was that achieved? If he bred that mare's vaginal vault absolutely provided this proper physical stimulation when she's in heat, okay? That mare's vaginal vault provides the proper pressure, the proper temperature, and lubrication while she's in heat, okay? And so we try to mimic this in this artificial setting, but it's absolutely met in the mare, okay? And so not a hard one to say there, okay? Now, the last thing was really, like I said, to possibly get a mare pregnant, we need one other thing to occur. If they're all dead, it's not going to work out, right? And that last one being, we need to maintain viable semen, okay? We go through all this collection process, we get that semen, and it's all dead. You can put it in a mare all day, and she's not going to get pregnant, okay? So, how do we maintain viable semen? Well, one thing that we still use today is something called an extender, okay? Sure, it's doing a little bit of twofold. One, it's extending out the volume and allowing us to increase the volume. It's also extending the life and the longevity of that semen, okay, by providing nutrients to it, balancing the pH. And so, what are the ingredients in extender? Well, glucose and non-fat dried milk, okay? What was in that leather bag full of goat's milk? Well, yeah, probably doing just that, okay? Providing some nutrients to it. And so not a far thought, okay? That leather bag protecting it as it comes back across the desert. And so this one, tough to say, but definitely in terms of our legend, it could have been plausible, okay? But we're going to use extenders to this day, okay? When we go through and we go through the semen processing and we utilize a dose for fresh insemination, we're just going to use this basic formula that has glucose and non-fat dried milk, okay? If all of a sudden we start to cool that, when we get to cooled semen, we're going to add an antibiotic to it, okay? Why might we add an antibiotic to that cooled semen? Well, now we have the potential of cooling it and shipping it across the country, okay? So it's going to receive that shipment, or the person is 24 hours later, okay? And so now we worry about some microbial growth that could occur over that long period of time. And so we don't want that to happen. So we can add various antibiotics. They could be amikacin, penicillin, ticarcillin. There's a number of things that we could add to that semen and that extender, okay? And so a lot of times you'll see we'll just use a CST extender, a cooled semen transport extender made by ARS. And again, it's just amikacin along with that glucose and that non-fat dried milk, okay? So these are the things that we're going to work through today as we go to collect that stallion, make sure that AV is built properly. And then as we process that semen, we're going to extend it and it's going to be ready for insemination, okay? And so with that, the next thing I want to talk to you about is that AV itself, okay? There are a few different AVs out there on the market, okay? But only two that are probably the most widely used across the United States. This would be right here, the Colorado or the CSU model AV, okay? You guys should be biased to this one, being here at CSU. This was developed here, and it is now marketed and sold by ARS, Animal Reproduction Systems, okay? And we do a lot of work with them over time. We've built densimeters with them, we've AVs, Stallion collection products, mare stuff, you name it, okay? And so ARS, Animal Reproduction Systems, is a great resource to be able to go out and purchase equine reproduction equipment from. So this, nothing fancy when you look at it, it's just a PVC shell. We've glued a handle on it, and it's got essentially a screw hole that sits right here, okay? So how does this work, okay? And then I'll talk you through the other AVs. This right here is going to have a latex water bladder that comes through, it folds over the ends, and then rubber bands on it. That water bladder is going to stay on this all the time, okay? It's not going to come off unless we have a hole in it, it's punctured, and it needs replaced, okay? So that water bladder is going to come through here, no kinks in it or anything, fold back over the edges, that's good to go, okay? Now, beyond that, when it's time to collect that stallion, you're also going to have a latex liner that is going to go through this, fold over one end, and then it's going to have a cone or a taper on one end of this AV, and that's going to lead to a collection bottle, okay? We just use, they're almost like a baby bottle, okay? And that have baby bottle liners in them, keeps everything sterile, and that collection bottle is attached to the end of that taper on the latex liner, okay? We can then put an entire collection bottle cover over it. They're little blue covers that are just insulated, okay? That insulated cover is going to do twofold, okay? One, it's going to protect that ejaculate once it's in that collection bottle from the UV light. UV light is detrimental to sperm cells, and it's also going to keep them from being cold shocked. As we move into the fall, into the winter months, if we're still collecting, again, it could be a big shock and adjustment in temperature from that stallion, the 48 to 50 degrees Celsius inside this AV to outside temperature, ambient temperature. And so we don't want those sperm cells to be cold shocked, so that insulated collection bottle cover does aid and assist with that, okay? So a few things, I told you that water bladder comes through this first before the liner, okay? And so when we have this AV ready to fill with water, all we simply do is, and you'll see this in video, is basically fill this right here through this port with water, okay, and completely full to begin with till it's overflowing at the proper temperature, 48 to 50 degrees Celsius. We may occasionally go a few degrees warmer, knowing that it's going to sit around for a while, and then by the time we collect, it will be in this target zone right here, okay, but that's what we're shooting for, okay. So we're going to take this till it's overflowing, and then we're going to put the cap back on, and it's going to sit aside until we get the stallion over, get him washed, and then are ready to collect. Once we're ready to collect, we're going to pull this off, and we're going to stick our arm in this AV a little bit, let some water out, and adjust that pressure for that stallion so that it is then the proper pressure. We keep it full right off the bat because it's going to retain the most heat if it has more water in it rather than cool off, okay? And so that's why it's full initially. We just have a simple temperature gauge on our sink, and again, you'll see that in our video as we make up the AV, okay? So latex liner, those are the most common. The only thing about latex liner is you do have to take them out, wash them, disinfect them, and it is a little bit of a cleaning process. You can also use disposable liners, but if you use disposable liners, some stallions may just not like that, okay? If they've used latex, the odds of them using a disposable are probably slim to none, but very easy cleanup. Unclip a little clasp, take it out, throw it in the trash, and you are donezo, okay? And so this is the CSU model AV. Two other models that you may come across or hear about. One is the Missouri model AV. Missouri model is just basically the latex liner and water bladder all in one piece, and then it's essentially got a leather piece around it with a handle that allows you to hold on to it. So it flops around a little bit more. It's not as rigid as the CSU model. The CSU model retains heat better than the Missouri model. Some people use the Missouri model more in warmer temperatures. To me, I don't like the flexibility and the flopping around of the Missouri model. I like the firmness of this CSU model right here, okay? But you could use either one. That Missouri model is a little bit tougher to clean and disinfect sometimes because the water bladder and the liner are all built into one piece, okay? So each stallion may have their own Missouri setup, okay? But that is another common one that you'll come across in breeding sheds across the United States. The other one that existed for some while was the Japanese model AV. Japanese model AV looked somewhat like this, but it was a tapered cone down on one end, okay? And that's where that collection bottle came off and attached to on that end. And the problem was stallions would enter into that AV, they would all of a sudden bell up, and they'd get stuck in this AV. So then they said, oh, well, we'll drill a hole in the cap right here, and when they bell up, it'll relieve some pressure, and all of a sudden, as you're holding this and you're trying to collect, next thing you know, water's shooting the stallion in the abdomen, and it was just a mess. It didn't work out great, and so it's not used very much. But again, the CSU Colorado model or the Missouri would be the two most common models that you will come across, okay? This one, like I said, developed here at CSU, and we do a lot of work with ARS, and happy to have this one, okay? And so with that, let's walk you over to the collection shed virtually, and I'm gonna show you around that collection shed. Hey everyone, so I've got you over at the ERL now, and I wanna walk you around the collection shed just a little bit and point out a few things, and then walk you through the process that you're about to see when we actually collect a stallion. And then in that video, I'll show you how that stallion's collected and we process semen. But it's a lot easier to kind of walk through the process in slow motion as we kind of discuss, and then it's going to be pretty fast paced once you get to see that. And so the ERL collection shed is quite nice now. It's a nice heated shed. Got nice rubber flooring in here, concrete walls, everything can be easily pressure washed and disinfected. It's a facility that is designed for teaching. And so you'll see railings all the way around that people can then stand behind, students, visitors, people for short courses, and they're protected. And they can stand in here and watch this collection and then be behind the rails. A few things are unique about this collection shed. I'll turn this video around in a bit so you can see, but through the glass windows that are in front of me is the semen lab, okay? And it's really nice to be able to just walk out of the collection shed and into the adjacent semen lab or semen processing lab during any season of the year. And again, it's right next door. We used to have to cross outside, go into another building, and not slip on the ice, and it was somewhat of a pain. And so a few things that make this collection shed very nice and unique. Like I said, one is this non-slip rubber floor. This is a floor that, again, if there's any water on, horse urinates on, anything like that, it drains through the floor, and then it goes to the nearest drain, but there's no standing water that's ever going to be on top of this floor. This phantom that sits over here is a hydraulic phantom. I'll point that out here in a bit, but it's nice because we can now change the height of it. This phantom has come a long way since maybe our classic old school ones that were a telephone pole wrapped in a mattress. People used to do some other crazy things, and so again, much nicer phantom now, wrapped in saran wrap on the back for biosecurity between stallions. CSU has kind of had this model of putting a set of stocks at the front, and I really do like that, okay? That set of stocks is going to be for our tease mare or for our hot mare, okay? And I'll walk you through the process you're going to see here in a bit, but I really do like that at the front, so when the stallion is on that phantom, he's got a visual of that mare, and it really helps to entice him throughout the process and keep him stimulated. Versus I've seen other collection sheds where that set of mare stocks is elsewhere, way behind the phantom, etc. And so I really do like it up at the front. It is a great location. We've got a number of garage doors in terms of access points. Mainly they're going to come in right here where you can't see behind the camera. Again, outside of the concrete walls that are easily sprayed down and disinfected, two other things to point out. These two rooms are closed right now, and that's okay. You don't need to see inside them. But the point is that there are two rooms, okay? This room on the right that you would see over here is what we refer to as the dirty room. This is where AVs are taken after the collection. They are disassembled, they're taken apart, they're cleaned, they get disinfected. Everything then happens in that dirty room that is after the collection process. This room to the left over here is basically our AV prep room. And so this is where the AVs are stored, where the liners are stored, where they're actually assembled and put together, where they're filled with water that is the correct temperature. All of that preparation occurs in this clean room off on the left. And so it's very nice to then have two separate rooms. because we've got two separate rooms, we've got this nice collection shed, we got another collection shed should we need it. CSU is set up to export to about any country in the world with frozen semen. And so it makes it great for a CSU to be able to have clients that come in and say, we want to export semen to this country. We're set up to do that. And so again, really, really cool. And so just to walk you through the collection process now, what you're going to see in this video, Stallion is going to come over from the stallion barn. Handler is going to have chain through the horse's mouth majority of the time. We use that as a cue for that stallion that it is time to be collected. I'll tell you where that's going to go after the collection process, but chains through the mouth. The person handling the stallion has a helmet on. We want to protect them at all times. They're going to come over and they're going to stand by this door that's right here. You don't need to see the door, but they're going to stand by that door. As long as everything is good in here, mare is set up in the stocks as our tease mare, they're going to be told, okay, you're good to enter. Stallion is going to enter, and they're going to come out to kind of the middle of the floor here, and they're going to tease that stallion from a distance while that mare's in the stocks, okay? Our goal is always to tease from a distance. Last resort would be to take, one step closer, maybe even go up to the mare, but we really don't want to do that. It's safe for the stallion, safe for the mare, the people involved, everyone to tease from a distance. And so most of the stallions, they're used to this process. They get to the middle of the room, they can start seeing that mare. They'll start vocalizing. If we did choose a mare that's in heat, or maybe we have an overectomized mare that we're using, if she's doing her job, maybe she's urinating, maybe she's winking a little bit, posturing, again, helping to stimulate that stallion. Again, if he needs just a hair more stimulation, sometimes it's just a matter of letting him take one more step closer to that mare, and that's all he needs, okay? Now, the person handling the stallion, their job is to do just that, handle the stallion and nothing else, okay? Keep everyone safe around them. And so somebody else in the collection shed, whether that's the person that's going to wash, the person that is actually collecting with the AV, they're going to be watching that stallion as he teases. And they're going to be vocalizing to the person that is handling, saying, okay, he's starting to drop, he's a quarter, he's halfway, okay, he's good to wash. Once they say he's good to wash, the person with that stallion is going to come over and they're going to stand that stallion up. And again, keep everyone safe around them. You're going to have one or two people that are going to come in with warm water. Again, we only wash with warm water, not soap. Soap is spermicidal, and we also don't want to kill any good flora or bacteria on that stallion's penis. That warm water is also going to add a stimulatory effect, okay? And so one or two people are going to come in with a wash bucket. If it's two, one person's going to hold wash bucket, one person's going to wash stallion penis. If it's just one, they'll come in and basically set bucket down and then wash that stallion's penis from the preputial ring all the way down. Remove any debris, check the faucet at the bottom, make sure there's no bean in there, but again, we're just trying to remove any debris, and you'll see again that stallion gets stimulated in that process. And so that's our warm water wash. After we washed, you're going to see the AV is already going to be prepped, but the person that's actually collecting with that AV is going to go over, they're going to remove that top cap, and they're going to stick their arm in that AV, much like that stallion's penis would, and it's going to allow some of that water to overflow out of that water bladder, and they're essentially adjusting the pressure just before that collection, okay? And so once that pressure has been adjusted, we're going to screw that cap back on, and they're going to have their arm in that AV holding. They're going to come around the railing right here, and they're going to look at the stallion, pending he's still good. They're going to say, he's ready and I'm ready, okay? Once they say he's ready and I'm ready, now we can actually go to collect that stallion. The person that is actually collecting, holding the AV is going to stand over here out of the way until that person that is handling the stallion has that stallion up on the phantom, okay? I don't want that person holding the AV right up next to that phantom until that stallion's on, because that stallion is going to jump up and he's going to swing his front feet out, and the last thing we want is for anybody to get clocked in the head or they're in the way and they get run over by the stallion handler. There's just too much confusion, okay? And so he's ready, I'm ready, they're going to stand off to the side, stallion handler is going to come over, and once they get to that phantom, that stallion may nudge that phantom a little bit. It purposefully has some play. I'll show you that when we walk up to it. And so they might move it around a little bit, and then they're going to mount that phantom, and again, front legs swing out. As soon as they're on that phantom, person collecting is going to move in with the AV, and once they have that AV, they're going to basically allow that stallion's penis to enter into the AV, deflect it in. And once they have done so, the biggest thing that's tough for people is to, if you need, you can brace it against the phantom, but to hold it in one spot, okay? If the stallion needs to come up a little more, you can go back and bump a little bit, lead them into that AV. But the key is to hold steady, okay? If you allow that stallion, as he's thrust into that AV, to push you around that phantom, he'll come all the way around the side of it. And so, again, it can be daunting a little bit as you first have somebody that's collecting with the AV. You've got stallion's feet right at your feet. He's thrusting into it. There's a lot going on, okay? And that AV is not light. And so, like I said, if you need to brace it against the phantom, you can do so. We're keeping that AV more or less parallel to that stallion's abdomen as he's thrusting into it. As soon as he starts to flag his tail, you'll see this motion with his tail of flagging. Each time his tail flags, that is a jet of ejaculate, okay? And so now that he's ejaculating, his tail is flagging, we're gonna just slightly drop that AV so that it's no longer tilting down. We don't want our ejaculate that just went into that AV to run back out the back, okay? So we're just ever so slightly gonna tilt that AV down so the semen runs through that AV and into the collection bottle, okay? At that point, that stallion can hang out there for a minute. We're gonna slowly take that AV off that stallion's penis. He'll slowly come off that phantom, and that's the most relaxed you're probably ever gonna see that stallion, okay? At that point in time, we take the chain out of the stallion's mouth, and we put the chain over the stallion's nose, okay? That for us and for that stallion is a behavioral cue for him, okay? He starts to associate that very calm behavior with chain over the nose, okay? So if we're gonna go out to the paddocks out there and get the stallion, bring him in for the day, hold him for the fair, anything else, chain over the nose, he knows he more or less better act like a gelding, okay? Sure, we know he's not a gelding, but he's gonna have that calmer behavior, and that's what we expect of him, okay? Chain through the mouth. You also see somebody with a helmet. He knows it's time to be collected. He can act a little more vocal, a little more animated, act more like a stallion, and that's perfectly acceptable, okay? Stallions really do appreciate that black and white. Now, you're gonna see in this video the collection, and again, this is a little bit different versus doing it real life this time of year. Again, it's already September. We're getting close to October here. It's not uncommon for it to take that stallion a few times perhaps to jump, okay? Libido might be decreasing a little bit as testosterone starts to decrease, okay? And so if it takes 2, even 3 jumps, not the end of the world. If we need to adjust temperature in the AV, we can do so as well. And so that's the process that you're going to see. If we're unsure if he flagged, we can always check the AV, take the collection bottle cover off, see if there's an ejaculate in that collection bottle. Once we've confirmed that it is, stallion's gonna go back home. We're gonna go take the collection bottle off that AV, disassemble that, and then take the remainder of that semen sample in that collection bottle into the semen lab and start processing it, okay? And we'll walk you through that in the video so you know exactly how to process it, looking at volume, concentration, and motility, and then subsequently figuring out that breeding dose and how many mares you can breed, okay? And so that's what you're going to visualize and what you're going to see. Let me walk you over to the phantom and point out a few other key things around here. So this is the phantom that you see here. Again, we've got saran wrap on the back, just from a biosecurity standpoint. This is a hydraulic phantom. We've got some knee, basically shoulders on here, little grabs for that stallion to wrap his legs around just to help keep him on the phantom. But you'll notice, again, this has a little bit of play and motion to it. That stallion may rub up against it a little bit and expect some movement just like you would from a mare, okay? And so when I talked about it being hydraulic, this is what's kind of cool. And so if you looked at this phantom, we could easily take this now. You can see it lowering. We can raise it back up. And so depending on the stallion that we are collecting, we can change and adjust the height of this phantom. And so that's pretty cool and pretty remarkable these days, okay? Nothing too fancy about our set of stocks. We've got, again, just a front door and a rear door, making sure ultimately that you have a safe place for your mare to be while that stallion is up on that phantom and that they're easily contained, okay? And so just walking you around the rest of the collection shed, you can see the railing, and then you can see just through those windows right there is where that semen processing lab is. And so once we're done with that collection, we'll go into that semen processing lab and evaluate that semen again for volume, concentration, and motility. And so with that, I hope you know a little bit more about the Equine Reproduction Lab in this part, mainly the stallion collection shed. And let's go watch that video now. So we've got our stallion in the collection shed now. He's teasing to that hot mare up front, and you can see him starting to drop, okay? Somebody is telling the stallion handler he's halfway, he's ready to wash. You see that mare posturing, urinating, doing her job, but she's a mare in heat. Now, they've got two people, one with a water bucket, another person washing. Again, this is just warm water, no soap. Soap is spermicidal. We don't want to also kill any good flora or bacteria. Washing the entire body of that stallion's penis, as well as the glans penis, and making sure there's no bean in the fossa right there. He's good and clean. And now you're going to see the person that is collecting with the AV well out of the way as that stallion mounts the phantom. This is a pretty quick process. He gets his front legs over those little hips on the phantom, enters the AV. We deflect that stallion's penis into the AV. We can bump him a little bit, get him to move up closer to that phantom, and you really got to hold steady, okay? This is the part that can be intimidating. You got those feet of the stallion, hind feet that are on the ground right next to yours. Hold it parallel to that stallion's abdomen. He's starting to flag. As he starts to flag, we just tilt that AV down slightly, as you'd see right now, so that semen runs down into the AV and that collection bottle and doesn't come back out the other side. He's relaxed, comes back out of that, and his job is done. Okay, we'll watch one more video of that collection just so you can see that here momentarily. Before we do that, you're going to see them empty out the water on that water bladder. And so that's being done right now. So we got another video. Stallion mounted the AV, person collecting, deflects that stallion's penis into the AV. You can see holding it parallel to that stallion's abdomen. He thrusts into it. They're planted, standing still. Again, that AV is heavy. You can brace it against the phantom if you need to. His tail is starting to flag. If you look at those flags right now, each time it flags, that's a jet of ejaculate. They've tilted that AV down, and semen is now going down into that collection bottle. And his job is done. Chain will come out of the mouth and go over the nose. Now comes time to evaluate the semen. And so this is where we will look at volume, concentration, and motility. AV is being assembled. This would typically be done in our dirty room. And so this little retaining clip is taken off of that latex liner. We've got a gel filter that sits in the top of that collection bottle, and that gel fraction that you would see right now is then pulled out with that gel filter and discarded. We are only concerned with the gel-free volume. We're going to take this and now pour this into a graduated cylinder. I would tell you anything that is in that incubator, any semen in the graduated cylinder, always label it. Take a piece of tape, label it with the stallion's name. But the graduated cylinder is the easiest way to evaluate volume. Okay, this is a pretty high volume that you see from this stallion. Typically, we'd expect this to be a pretty low concentration as a result. Volume and concentration usually inversely related. And so what we're going to do now, we have volume in that graduated cylinder, is measure concentration. This is done in this blue box densimeter. This is basically a glorified spectrophotometer. And so we're going to add 3.42 mils of formalin solution. This formalin solution is going to kill the sperm cells, but unlike water, they're not going to swell or expand in size. And we basically place this cuvette in there that is just formalin solution and zero it out. We're going to do this every time to make sure there's not any imperfections in the plastic, and so it gives us a good solid number every time by zeroing it. And now we're going to add 180 microliters of raw semen. Okay, it must be raw semen. That glorified spectrophotometer is like an old Bosch and Lomb Spec 20. It's measuring percent light transmission, and so we're going to add 180 microliters of raw semen. It can't be extended. They're milk-based extenders. Otherwise, that would affect the percent light transmission. And so we've added that to our cuvette. Please make sure you do this outside the densimeter. We don't want to miss getting any raw semen inside that densimeter. We'll place a cap on it and just gently invert it a few times. We're not going to shake it up. We don't want to introduce any air bubbles. Those might affect our refraction of light and percent light transmission. So we place it back into the cuvette. Rib side is towards the front and back. Clear side is left and right where that light beam is going to pass. After you press go, it'll then return a number to you. This tells you it is 115 million sperm cells per milliliter, okay? As to be expected with that very high volume that you just saw. If it was very low volume, 10 mils, you might have 800 million per mil or more, okay? And so that's that inverse relationship of volume and concentration. Now we've measured volume, we've measured concentration, we're going to look at motility. To measure motility under the microscope, we need to dilute this raw semen sample out with a little bit of extender. So he's placed a little bit of raw semen in a glass test tube, and we're now going to mix up some semen extender. For the purposes of this, we're just going to use a basic formula extender. This is the ARS basic formula. All it has in it is glucose and non-fat dried milk. Okay. If it was a cooled semen extender, we would also add antibiotics to it, something like amikacin. semen. And so this dry powder and this sterile water are essentially added to each other and then mixed up. This improves longevity when you keep them essentially separate with a part A and part B, the powder versus the sterile water. Once you mix the two components up, it drastically decreases the shelf life to it. If we're not going to use it all right at once, we would write on it with the date and the time that we made it up, and again, use it up within 24 hours usually. And so we've got this basic formula extender. He's just mixing that up right now, and we're going to add a determined amount of that to our raw semen. Depends on our concentration on how much extender we're going to add. And so we add some extender to that raw semen. We now have a good homogeneous mixture, and we'll mix that up and then take a sample and put that on our glass slides. And it is always important, anytime you pull raw semen off of that graduated cylinder, mix it up, make sure you do have that good homogeneous sample. And so we take a little drop, put it on a microscope slide, we put a cover slip on this. This is a machine called a CASA, or a computer-assisted sperm analysis machine. You do not need this machine and this expensive a one just to simply evaluate semen motility. This gives you a very objective analysis, good for research. He's going to rack this around to get it in the field of view. All you need is a simple phase contrast microscope to be able to evaluate motility. So this objective approach tells you total motility is 78%, progressive motility is 35%, so that fraction is 78 over 35. Total motility, again, you can just do this by looking at it. Total motility is essentially the live versus dead cells. And so if you looked at this, we would say are 60% of them alive and moving? Yes. Are 70% of them alive and moving? Yes. Are 80%? Not quite. You might arrive at 78, 75, somewhere in there. Then that progressive motility, how many of those cells are moving in a forward progression across the field of the microscope, not just in tight little circles. And we'd say, are 20% of them moving in a forward direction? Yes. 30%, close to it. 40%, not quite. And probably just over 30%, we'd arrive at our progressive motility. Okay, most stallions are better than this in progressive, but that's simply how we would evaluate it. Okay, and so always written as a fraction, total over progressive motility. In this case, that 78 over 35 that the CASA gave us. And so with that, you now know how to evaluate volume, concentration, and motility. Okay, everyone. So we've just gone through the semen processing, and you guys saw how we evaluated volume, concentration, and motility, but we need to talk through how to figure out what that breeding dose is going to be, and then how many mares you can breed as a result. And so just to talk through that, right now we could throw 3 parameters up. It doesn't matter. This is just for you, okay? But the key is you do need to know how to figure out the breeding dose and how many mares you can breed. It's imperative, okay? And so we're just going to throw some numbers in here. Let's say this stallion gave us 27 milliliters. Let's say it's a concentration of 246 million sperm cells per milliliter. And so that's our notation of times 10 to the 6th per milliliter, 246 million per milliliter. One thing, again, just as a refresher, when you are collecting stallions, those that have really high volume, usually it's going to be more dilute. And if you have a stallion that gives you really low volume, it's going to be much more concentrated, okay? But again, not always, but generally rule of thumb. Motility, let's do 87 over 72, okay? This is what? This is total. This is right here, progressive, okay? It is always written as a fraction. It is always total over progressive motility. That progressive can never be greater than that total, okay? Remember that total motility is essentially alive versus dead. How many of those sperm cells on that microscope field are alive versus how many are dead? Progressive, how many are moving in a plane and a forward motion across that microscope field? It doesn't have to be in a straight line, but they're not going in tight little circles. And so we'll use that 87 over 72. So how can we figure out our breeding dose? You can do this a couple ways, but we'll tell you this. Give you some magical formula. So if you take what you want, divide it by what you have, it'll give you what you need. You say, well, what the heck does that mean? What do we want, okay? Well, for purposes of today and our discussions, fresh insemination dose, okay? What you want in the industry standard is 500 times 10 to the 6th progressively motile sperm cells. 500 million progressively motile sperm cells. That is the industry standard for a fresh insemination dose. If it was cooled, which we're not going to talk about today, it'd be double that. It'd be 1 billion progressively motile sperm cells, okay? So this is what you want, okay? We're going to only talk in relation to that fresh insemination dose. What do you have? Well, that's up there, okay? So let's write this out. 500 times 10 to the 6th progressively motile sperm cells. What do you have? Well, you have 246 times 10 to the 6th. But are they all alive and progressive? No, okay? This is your progressive motility right here, okay? 72%. So if we took 72% of that, wouldn't that be how many progressively motile sperm cells we have? Yeah. So we could do 246 essentially times that 0.72. And that's going to give us our breeding dose. Now, you could try to do order of operations. You know, the 10 to the 6 cancel out. You could do this times this, and then 500 divided by that and retain all those numbers. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, the easiest way to do this is just simply take 500 divided by 246 divided by 0.72, and what? Well, oftentimes we give you these super fancy calculators because you don't need to do any crazy math. So 500 divided by 246 divided by 0.72 equals 2.8, okay? And so wherever you want to write it, 2.8 mils per dose, okay? What does that mean? We need 2.8 mils of raw semen per breeding dose, okay? So that's how we're figuring out what your breeding dose is, okay? Remember that. We're only concerned with this class with the fresh insemination dose. The next question you have to ask yourself is how many mares can I breed, okay? Well, what was your volume? You had 27 mils, okay? We'll put it over here. So, number of mares, okay? So, you've got 27 mares, or excuse me, 27 milliliters, okay? And you got a breeding dose of 2.8 mils per dose. So 27 divided by 2.8 equals what? 27 divided by 2.8 equals 9.6, okay? So we'd say you can breed 9.6 mares. But the key is what? You always have to round down, okay? Do you have enough semen there to breed 10 mares? No, even though it's 9.6? No, you don't. And so always round down. That is the key, okay? And so you have enough to breed 9 mares. Now, you could take that 27 divided by 9, and it might go up just a hair over the 2.8. That's fine. You don't have to throw that 0.6 of a mare or 0.6 of a mare down the drain. Everybody could just get a hair more. No big deal there. But you only have enough semen to then be able to breed 9 mares. We used to tease and say 9 mares and a small pony, but you only have enough for 9 mares, okay? Okay, everyone, so I've got you back here and you've seen that stallion collection process, the evaluation of semen. One other thing I wanted to point out and note earlier when it comes to filling this AV in the proper temperature, we mentioned, you know, roughly a 48 to 50 degrees Celsius. The other thing I want to make sure you're aware of is that that is not too hot, okay? And that you're not paying attention to the temperature and it's, you know, 60 degrees Celsius, okay? So I'll give you a little comparison. We could take this AV in this water bladder and we could fill it with ice water, cold water, okay? Anything you want. We could go try to collect a stallion right now. He'd enter this AV and he'd probably squeal and go flying backwards off the phantom. He's not gonna collect in that, but it didn't hurt him, okay? Give him 30 seconds, couple minutes maybe, and he'll try again. He's a persistent son of a gun, okay? A lot of times if it takes us several mounts to be able to collect the stallion, this AV cools off enough that we may have to refill it and adjust the temperature, okay? Not a big deal. But what you don't want to do is get it so hot that you actually burn the stallion, okay? If you get it so hot, you burn that stallion's penis, it might be painful to him, and he might be apprehensive to collect again in the future. And so just please do make sure if you're the one filling the AV, you absolutely pay attention to that temperature, okay? The other thing we wanted to chat about before we go ultrasound that mare is a couple things in relation to various hormones, okay? And so two main hormones that we're going to discuss right now. We talked about having that live mare in heat for our collection process. We've got these two abbreviated. This would be our estrogen, this would be our progesterone, okay? And so when you have a live mare in heat, which one of these is elevated? Well, estrogen's elevated, right? And progesterone is nearly absent, okay? These progesterone levels are gonna be less than 1 nanogram per mil, okay? And so that absence of progesterone is absolutely important. Where is this estrogen being produced by that mare that's in heat? Being produced by that follicle, right? It's a steroid hormone produced by the gonad. And so you think about that mare, those follicular waves, FSH, all of a sudden we have one follicle that continues to diverge and grow and become the dominant follicle. That dominant follicle starts cranking out estrogen, and that's what's responsible for that mare showing behavioral signs of estrus or heat, okay? The winking, posturing, urinating, etc. That's all a result of that estrogen produced by that dominant follicle, okay? Now, we talk about that process, all of a sudden that dominant follicle, say it's a quarter horse mare, gets to be 45 millimeters in size, give or take. All of a sudden it ruptures, she ovulates. What happens? Well, each one of those follicles contains what? One egg or one oocyte, okay? So all of a sudden she ovulates, that oocyte's evacuated, it ends up down in the infundibulum, eventually down into the oviduct. Fertilization occurs in that oviduct. And from there, when we talk about our follicle, that follicle all of a sudden becomes the corpus hemorrhagicum, fills with blood, and then that structure luteinizes and becomes a CL. What does that CL start producing? Progesterone, okay? And so that progesterone being produced by that active CL, okay? And so I don't know what we're gonna see when we ultrasound a mare today. She could have several follicles on her ovaries, she could have a CL. Your guess is as good as mine. And so we'll evaluate that once we look at her, okay? That CL is essentially going to be maintained there. If fertilization occurs, mare becomes pregnant, progesterone is that hormone of pregnancy. It's going to maintain that quiescent uterus, okay? If she's not pregnant, fertilization didn't occur, then what? Well, day 15, give or take, 14, 15, all of a sudden that mare's uterus is going to release prostaglandin F2 alpha. It's going to lyse or destroy this CL, and then that whole cycle repeats every 21 days, okay? And so we're going to look and evaluate what structures are on that mare's ovary, okay? Look for follicles, look for that CL. We'll talk about it once we have you down in the stocks. Again, that follicle is going to look like this black, but it's going to be fluid-filled structure, and each one of those, again, containing that one egg or that oocyte. And so with that, let's hop downstairs, and we're going to go ultrasound a mare. Okay, everyone, so I've got you down in the stocks here. We're going to ultrasound this mare here shortly and see what structure she has on her ovary, okay? Whether she's got some follicles, whether she's got a CL, I don't know. We'll find out here, okay? Before we do that, I want to talk you through a little bit of how ultrasound works. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't seen a mare ultrasounded before. That's fine. And then that reproductive anatomy of the mare, just so you're familiar with that. And so let's first start with this mare right here. And so we could look at her perineal conformation right here. And so this would be her vulva, the lips of the vulva, the labia right here, and up here her anus. And so we're actually going to ultrasound rectally, okay? With a mare, there's no way I can take that ultrasound probe and just stick it on the outside of that horse where her ovaries are and get through all of that skin, muscle mass, and tissue to be able to ultrasound properly, okay? And so we have to do it rectally. And so if you've seen it before, great. If not, again, we'll walk you through that process. And so right above, we'll kind of take you in, is where we're going to have vaginal bulb. And then all of a sudden we're going to encounter cervix, and then uterine body is going to come forward a little bit and then split at bifurcation into left and right uterine horns, okay? Those uterine horns sitting right here, and then we have ovary on each side, okay? And so we're going to come in and methodically follow. We don't want to just go in and jump. Most people will talk about learning to palpate before they ultrasound as well, but we're going to methodically go in, view that entire uterine body, go all the way to the bifurcation, and then we're going to go up each uterine horn and follow that until we see ovary, okay? Then we're going to scan from one side of the ovary all the way to the other and get every structure that is there, okay? So again, it's important that we do that in kind of that methodical approach. When we're looking at that on ultrasound, I'll describe it to you, but over the uterine body, this probe that I'll talk you through here in a moment, this probe is directly over top of that uterine body, and you have what we call a longitudinal view. It's basically just going to be a long rectangle on top of this uterine body, okay? As we start to go over top of the uterine horn, now all of a sudden we've got a cross section, okay? Uterine horn, just like my arm, now we're going perpendicular to it, okay? You're gonna see a circular kind of cookie cutter cross section of uterine horn, just so that you can visualize that a little bit better. When you're first looking at ultrasound images, sometimes it looks like, it's goobly gop on there and you're like, what the heck am I viewing? But you can start to point that out, and I'll try to point it out as well. And so uterine body, you're going to see longitudinal view, go up uterine horn, you're going to see that circular view all the way to our ovary. If we see follicles on that ovary, which I'm sure we will, they're going to be solid black, fluid filled. And so I lead to that a little bit. How does fluid look on ultrasound? Well, clear fluid is black. And then as we have some echogenicity, it's all of a sudden going to get more gray, and then bone looks white on ultrasound. And so that's going to give you a little bit of a perspective of that. And so, we'll go in rectally, but we're going in the same motion. Uterine horns are up here, ovaries are sitting right here, but I cannot take this probe and just go simply on top of that muscle. Again, it's not going to make its way through and give you a view of the ovary. And so just talking to you briefly about ultrasound, we've got this ultrasound set up today that we're going to view and just to show you. But this is a 5 megahertz rectal probe. This is the most common probe used for equine reproduction. And on the bottom of this probe, this is the expensive part. Don't drop this probe ever, okay? If you do, you better run for your dear life. But on the bottom of this probe right here, this little sensor area that you see right here, this is full of a whole bunch of little piezo crystals, okay? Those crystals are then energized and emit sound waves out, okay? And then how much those sound waves then return back produces this resulting image, okay? Through fluid, they just keep going. Bone, they hit and they bounce right back, okay? And then it returns this white image. And so those little piezo crystals are being emitted from this little zone right here. If I move my finger on the top of this probe right here, you may or may not be able to see, you can see my finger moving on the left side of the screen right here, okay? As I come all the way down to the bottom, moving my finger here, I can see it on ultrasound right here, okay, it's bottom. So it's important that you know orientation as you're in the mare, and I know that what is most cranial, okay, at the front of this probe is on the left side of the screen, okay? And so again, it's all part of just getting used to it. So with that, I think let's go ahead and ultrasound this mare and let's see what she has on her ovaries, okay? During the breeding season, this is something that we do and vets do here at the reproduction lab every single day of the breeding season, okay? We are scanning all these mares to try to gauge where they're at in their cycle, have they ovulated, do preg checks, fluid checks, you name it. So this is a very common tool that we're using, okay? And so with that, like I said, we'll go ahead and ultrasound. So I'm just gonna put a sleeve on, and then we'll just get a little bit of lube. And she should be cleaned out for the most part already. So mares, again, you do have to be careful and cautious. So if she starts having a little contraction in her erector cavity, I'm just going to wait it out, okay? I'm not going to force my way through. But she's completely cleaned out, so now becomes the conversation of ultrasounding. Okay, and so with that, we just need a little more lube. We want good contact between this sensor, those piezo crystals, and that mare's rectum, okay? And so let's go ahead and put this probe inside of her, and then you guys can start visualizing on the ultrasound what we are looking at, okay? Okay, so this that you see right here is uterine body, okay? This would be that longitudinal view. This is muscular layer up top, endometrium to the inside, okay? We can continue to advance forward. This is all uterine body still, and you're going to eventually see this view change. Now all of a sudden you see this circle, okay? This circle that you see is what? It is uterine horn. This is left uterine horn that you'd see. And so let's follow that. Get in here a little bit. And so it's right here. You just got to continue to follow. And so we're going to follow that all the way up to her left ovary, okay? And so what is that? Well, she's got a massive follicle over there on her left ovary. This is one large follicle. What is inside that one follicle? An oocyte or an egg, okay? Each one of those follicles, there's one here, There's one down there. We scan all the way to the other side, one here. So several follicles. Each one of these demarcations, we can measure it. Each one of these demarcations on the right is 10 millimeters. And so she easily has a 31, 32 millimeter follicle right there. We could come back down uterine horn. So this is that left uterine horn again. We're going to come back down. Now we're at the bifurcation where the uterine body splits into the two horns. And now we could pick up this that you see right here is right uterine horn, okay? Try to keep it in the view for you. You see that cookie cutter cross section. And what? There is her right ovary, okay? And so you look at another big follicle over there, and we're gonna scan it from one side all the way to the other. There's uterine horn. Several smaller follicles, 10, 12 millimeter follicles as well. When we're recording follicles as we're looking at a mare and scanning her, we're not going to just record that large follicle, we're going to record it all the way down to something insignificant just so that we know we didn't miss anything, okay? So I'm going to record, again, we can measure, and we would on this large one from the longest axis, but we won't do anything important now. We could measure that 33 millimeter follicle and then also record a 15, 12, and a 10, okay? And so as we come back down, we're back to uterine body right here, okay? And so this was that, just to come down and follow, that right uterine horn. You can see come back down, uterine body, and then we can scan this mare all the way back out, okay? And right here, we're back to good clean uterine body, no fluid. We're constantly checking for that as well. So with that, you just got a little bit of a view on ultrasound of both of her ovaries and what she had there. Okay, we didn't see any corpus luteum, no luteal structures, so she's not producing any progesterone right now. She's got some decent sized follicles that I would beg to guess that are still producing some estrogen. And so I haven't seen this mare out in the pen. She still could be showing some behavioral signs of heat from those follicles. Again, they're pretty decent in size, but I just wanted you to see that ultrasound process. I encourage you to go over to the Repro lab again every morning, 7 a.m. there in the stocks ultrasounding mares. And it's a cool thing to be there just to get used to what you're seeing on ultrasound and then also making breeding management decisions, okay, based on what this mare has today, knowing follicles grow 3 to 5 millimeters each day, when we're going to breed and when we're going to make those decisions to call and have that stallion collected, semen shipped in, breed that mare, preg check her later, etc. Okay, and so it really is a cool and a fascinating process that I hope you guys become a part of. And so with that, I hope you guys learned a good bit today about the stallion collection process, processing the semen, ultrasounding the mare, everything equine reproduction. And so we'll talk to you guys next time.